I'm willing to take the criticism at face value. You know, the question is then what? If the committees, conferences, and elections aren't built to listen, you know, then what is the answer?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
So I'm assuming that we don't have Matt in the Zoom. Bummer. I don't know. I don't think that I was like weird in my email, and I don't think that I've been, unnecessarily confrontational. You know, I made it clear that I disagree with him. I made it clear that I disagreed with him when I invited him on the program. So, you know, I wouldn't have thought that my, conversation topics would have been a surprise. But nevertheless, it is what it is. Maybe he just, maybe something came up. You know, I'll assume the best. So Matt Cavagrotti he wrote a piece for Sublation Magazine. He is currently an IT professional based in Knoxville, Tennessee. He previously worked at UPS, where he served as a shop steward with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Local 519 for 7 years. Matt studied history at the University of Tennessee, focusing on the history of organized labor and its intersection with socialism in the United States. He is also a longtime member of the Platypus Affiliated Society. So he wrote this piece for Sublation Magazine, Against the Machine, Why I No Longer Believe in Union Reformism. And so he talks about how he was kind of looking for a job, and he had a friend respond, how about a job with decent pay and incredible benefits where you can build socialist revolution at the same time? Talking about working at UPS and being a member of the Teamsters and trying to build the labor movement in that way. And so, he talks about how he decided, that's an interesting offer. I'll take it. He said that, that because of his affiliation with the Platypus Affiliated Society, which he describes as a Marxist group with chapters on many college campuses, I was skeptical, he says. Platypus contends that the left is not merely weak, but dead, and that any revival must begin from that recognition. So I was guarded against most forms of activism. And I think that this is kind of, you start to show like a little bit here, you're guarded against most forms of activism. Well, then what's the proposition?
What does the left do if not active?
Yeah, if not activism, yeah. I don't know.
I'm already a little confused, but
So I was guarded against most forms of activism, including any attempt to reboot the New Left's failed turn to industry of the 1970s. But the job met my needs and the historical tension intrigued me, so I took it. I called it bluff. And, this is like, again, I'm already, as I'm reading this, like, describing the New Left's turn to industry as a failure. As opposed to what? The New Left's turn to culture, which worked so well, the cultural left, all of that, like, that worked so great. Obviously, the turn to industry did not result in a proletarian revolution or whatever. But, like, there were results there. People's lives were improved, and some unions were made more militant for a time. So anyway. Let's see. I really hate that he's not here because I don't want to just read the whole piece. I don't want to, I'll drop it in the chat so folks can read it. I don't know if I should read the whole piece or if I should, I got it. I already got it. I don't know if I should read the whole piece or not. I don't know if that's poor taste to read the whole piece. Let's see how many words it is. It's kind of a long piece. I don't think I have time to read all of it. Let's see. What is the word count of this piece?
Yeah, for me, I think I'm just curious kind of what the alternative is. Because I've made the calculation that worker power is critical to any sort of progress. In this country, in this state, in this world, it requires more power for working people. And so if you accept that premise, it makes sense that unions are an important vehicle to that end, right? I mean, these are literally organizations of workers and only workers. You could argue about, the top layer of union leadership and whether they're still grounded in the shop floor struggle. That's another conversation. These are organizations that are imperfect, but they are tools of the working class. And so I think if you acknowledge that workers need more power, and that is key to winning a better world, then I'm not sure where else you go if you say that activism within unions is a dead end. I'm open to other alternatives if there are alternatives that are more effective. Like I know there are people who work on building worker cooperatives and building other structures and institutions, and I think that's valid work and needed. But, if you're not going to be activist and you're not going to work with the unions, it's almost like, well, what is the point of having these beliefs and ideas, right? If you're not, and maybe that's me, but when I became more like politically savvy, I guess you would say, when I read more and just became really concerned about the state of our world, I felt like I had to do something about it. It was like, okay, now I have this knowledge, I have this awareness that a lot of us are getting screwed by this system. How can I make a difference, right? Like, how can I personally contribute to something? What do I do with this information now? And so I'm willing to accept that in many cases, perhaps activism isn't really doing a whole lot. And I think there are like degrees of quality among activism. Some is more effective than others. But, those are some of the things I'm kind of, wrestling with in relation to this piece.
Yeah, so I think I've got a couple of the things that I wanted to highlight here. And obviously, you can go and read the piece for the full thing. I don't think I'm going to be taking any of it out of context. But so he's got a segment here, what union reformism actually is. The myth I walked into is an old one that committed socialists can transform the labor movement from within. They can seize the unions back from calcified leadership and turn them into engines of class struggle. Whether it is TDU, labor notes, or DSA adjacent efforts, the idea is the same: join, reform, radicalize. But the reality I encountered at UPS was not one of contested power. It was one absent of such. I was sent to the air operation, smaller and more isolated than the main ground hub, and found no visible union presence, no stewards, no accountability. Half my coworkers were dues-paying members, but that meant nothing in practice. When I met my local union's president to say I wanted to build militancy there, he simply appointed me steward once I got seniority. It wasn't a power struggle, it was a vacancy. This, I came to understand, is what union reformism really involves: stepping into empty roles in structures that functionally do not want to be reformed, only managed. You will not fight your way into power. You will be given just enough of it to exhaust yourself. And,
That's not totally wrong.
That's not wrong, but it's not wrong at all, in fact, in many states. I mean, we've talked about that explicitly, how in so many places where you have organizations that can be vehicles for social change, many of them are calcified, are they're not fighting institutions, they are barren of leadership. And that presents, in my mind, opportunity, I think. And it takes work, but, and so obviously you'll be given enough of it to exhaust yourself. Yes. What work are you going to do that is going to change the world that is not going to exhaust you?
Even if you believe reading circles is the answer, that is what we got to do.
That takes work. It takes work to organize reading circles.
Yeah, you could really burn yourself out doing that. You could really exhaust yourself doing that, right? Because if you're committed to it, ideally you think, well, we've got to keep growing. We've got to keep building.
We got to get more people in this reading circle.
Right. We have one reading circle. We need 2. Oh, we've got 2 colleges. We need 4. Right. That's kind of the mentality. If you're, aggressive, I think, or committed to some sort of militancy and change.
In 2022, I finally had the leverage to file a grievance against the company over Article 40, the section of the UPS Teamsters contract that governs air operations. The language is vague and full of loopholes, and management has long used it to avoid providing rights and protections enjoyed by all other union-represented employees of the company. I knew from online chatter that air workers had been complaining about this article for years, but nothing had ever been done. So I launched a campaign, Fix Article 40. I built a website, organized a national network of air workers across the country, gathered testimony, and drafted contract proposals for national negotiations. Initially, I expected support mostly from inside the air hubs, but as it turned out, air drivers who shuttle volume from ground hubs to airports were being hit even harder. Their jobs were being gutted. Many had no protections. Some were in tears on the phone. Their fear and desperation were visceral. My original goal was to get air workers from 100 cities across 50 states, all to submit our proposals to the Teamsters headquarters in Washington. The final tally was 50 cities across 25 states. Not bad for a first stab. And it sounds like this guy is a pretty effective organizer. I mean, that, found a need that was widely felt and deeply felt, and, seems like he did some good work. This campaign took off precisely because it gave voice to a group long abandoned by union officialdom, but the success had a bitter aftertaste. There was no real infrastructure to support it. The union had mechanisms, committees, conferences, elections, but they weren't built to listen. They were built to contain. You can do the work, raise the alarm, mobilize your coworkers, and still quietly disappear. Burnout, disillusionment, or just quiet withdrawal is the norm. The union machine doesn't punish you openly. It just absorbs you and lets your effort dissipate. One of the most telling aspects of the Fix Article 40 campaign was its interaction with Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Thankfully, the staffer assigned to assist came from outside the Teamsters, so he wasn't entrenched in the usual internal dynamics. He was sincere and I think genuinely tried his best to contribute to the campaign's success. TDU as an organization, however, was another story. By the time the support was offered, most of the campaign's groundwork was already done. TDU saw the initiative as a good look that didn't require too much investment, and when it came time to push for concrete outcomes, they offered gestures of support, but nothing that risked political capital or challenged the boundaries of their coalition. The deeper issue was structural. Air workers make up only 5% of the UPS bargaining unit, even though air operations generate a disproportionately large share of profit. From an electoral standpoint, one might argue that supporting our cause wasn't worth the investment, but that's precisely the problem. A union should not be judged by what it secures for its most visible or strategically advantageous members. It should be judged by what it secures for its most vulnerable members, from those easiest to ignore, but most in need of protection. If a reform movement balks at defending members because the numbers aren't there, then it's not a reform movement at all. It's just a more efficient manager of the same exclusions. And this underscores a larger tension, the degree to which reform organizations like TDU actually influence the direction of the union or are merely trying to preserve their place within it. What happens when a group like TDU, long the outsider voice of militant reform, actually gets a foothold in power? Does it maintain its militant posture, or does it start playing defense? So he goes on and talks about how he feels like it's kind of playing more defense. He talks about the formation of Teamsters Mobilized as a primarily part-time UPS Teamster formation, et cetera, et cetera. And, all of this, I'm willing to take the criticism at face value. I'm sure, as with anything, people on the other side of this conversation are going to have a different view of what happened as a fact of the matter question. But I'm even willing to take it exactly as Matt says it. The question is then what? If the committees, conferences, and elections aren't built to listen, they're built to contain, then what is the answer? You can change those committees, conferences, and elections to be something that are built to listen, presumably, or you can build red unions, this is what I said to him in our emails, is that, as Adam kind of laid out, I believe that the working class is uniquely positioned to change society because of the power of their production. And so, therefore, if you agree with that premise, if it is true that the working class as such, as the producers of wealth in our economy, are uniquely placed because of the value of their production, then organization of the working class is paramount. And so if you take premise 1 as true, and then you take premise 2 as true, which is that the organization of the working class is paramount, then you're basically kind of, as I see it, left with 2 paths, right? You're left with 2 paths. Either you want to try to reform the unions that exist and build them into a stronger, stronger organizations that are capable of laying the groundwork for broader social change, or like you build red unions, and that's a perspective that people have, and maybe it seems like it works sometimes, seems like it doesn't. And the way that I read the history, I feel more convinced that building existing unions into more militant vehicles, into more militant organizations, are that seems to have a better historical pedigree, in my view. And so he talked about that. He talked about how TDU kind of went into a defensive posture post O'Brien Zuckerman. They became less critical, et cetera. And that is obviously true, right? That the TDU became less critical of the administration once they became part of it. And talked about the formation of Teamsters Mobilize as a primarily part-time sort of formation of the UPS Teamsters, which is an important constituency. And he talks about how, the UPS Teamster, like the leaders of the UPS Teamster kind of groups are, concerned about giving the part-timers too much power because it might threaten kind of the balance of things, because the drivers kind of have all the power right now, et cetera, et cetera. And, I'm happy to kind of stipulate all of that. And then he goes on to talk about who benefits. The people who survive inside this apparatus are not the ones who take risks. They're the ones who come to identify with it, and it's obviously at least partly true. A layer of semi-professional operatives, staffers, and ideologues, many unelected, many unaccountable, continue to set the tone and direction of the labor left. These individuals are not necessarily malicious, but their continued relevance depends on a performance of struggle that never goes too far. Their identities, careers, and routines are anchored to a movement that does not move, and so they maintain a strategic orthodoxy, not because it delivers, but because it keeps them in business, et cetera, et cetera. Reform becomes a lifestyle. I don't want to be unfair. There are people embedded in the union who do real work. Some local officers are responsive. Some campaigns create real leverage if you're already inside, if this is your long-term terrain. I'm not saying you should walk away. By all means, I wish you nothing but the best. But if you're standing outside thinking of stepping in, don't. At least not likely. Don't do it on somebody, at least not lightly. Don't do it on someone else's pitch, especially not for political reasons. And so, like he says, I don't want to be unfair. He's not saying like nobody should do it, but he's really, really like poo-pooing it as a strategy for broader social change. If you're standing outside thinking of stepping in, don't. That's his, that's his line. At least not like lightly. Don't do it on someone else's pitch, especially not for political reasons. And like,
Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
I don't necessarily disagree with that wholesale in the sense that it is not an easy thing to do. Yeah. And so, no, you shouldn't. If you decide that you want to commit your life to organizing inside the labor movement, that's not an easy decision to make, and it's not a light one to make, and you shouldn't enter that lightly, and you shouldn't go into it thinking it will be easy or glamorous or any of that. So yeah, I can see that position. I just think that you have to weigh the potential cost and benefits. Like, okay, it's going to be hard, it's going to be messy, and all those things. But you have the potential, as you said earlier, to really impact people's lives and make a difference in people's lives. And maybe that's worth it for you. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. That's not the right fit for you. I'm a big believer that it takes all kinds, and not everyone listening to this show is going to be the exact person who needs to, enter into the unions to reform them and go about that mission. But some of you are, I believe. Some of you are, and we do need talented, committed people willing to organize and grow the labor movement in the United States. I think that is a worthy mission. And no, you shouldn't enter that lightly, but I think it's a mission worth doing. And I'm not sure if he agrees.
Well, it's a mission worth doing, and any mission worth doing, I think, is going to be similarly taxing. His closing paragraphs are, I no longer believe in union reformism as a viable political project. It may yield occasional tactical wins, but as a path to meaningful social change, it costs too much and gives too little. Protect your time, protect your mind, protect your spirit. Don't throw yourself into a machine that survives by wearing people out. You don't owe that to anyone, not even the working class, if such a thing still exists in coherent form. You owe it to yourself to live fully, think clearly, and refuse rules written for you by institutions that will not change. Call the bluff and then walk away. And it's like, it costs too much and gives too little. You know, like, if that is, it has to be, that statement is comparative. Too much, too little, as compared to what? What is it that you want to do to create meaningful social change that costs just enough and gives just enough? Yeah, I mean, what is it? Like, you have to have, I think, because if you don't have an alternative, then you are pushing people into nihilism. You know, I mean, this protect your time, protect your mind, protect your peace. That sounds like, excuse my French, lib shit. I mean, right?
I mean, I think
That's like, I don't know.
Look, I understand that doing this kind of work is very difficult on your mind and your spirit. And people have to pace themselves. People have to take breaks. Sometimes people burn out and they have to step away for their own mental health and physical health. I understand that and respect that. But I think to recognize that on a case-by-case basis is not the same as saying to people, don't even try it in the first place. Yes. I think there is a difference in that. And no, it's not for everybody. Right. But I think it is for some folks. I think we really do need some people organizing unions, both within existing structures and organizing new shops. I think that is pretty critical to building up working class power. And, I hear the argument about, is there even a working class, so to speak? And I think, that's a deeper conversation, but we can all agree that there is a lack of a coherent working class that is organized and is united. But by and large, that's not the same as saying there is no working class. Right. I think there is a distinction there to be made as well.
Well, and this is the thing that I said that I think if you're going to make an article like this, encouraging people, this is a persuasive essay, obviously. And the goal of the persuasion is to make people less likely to do union reform, to commit their time to that as a project. And so I do think that if you are a political actor and you have a persuasive essay to pull people out of activity, then you need to, and you care about politics. Maybe you don't, and maybe that's I don't know, the Platypus Affiliated Society. I'd never heard of it before. And maybe it's like a nihilist sort of thing. I don't know. But I do think that if you care about politics, then you should have an alternate view that you present people that might have some more hope. And he doesn't. He says, I don't have a roadmap. I'm suspicious of anyone who claims to, but I do think we've neglected a vital terrain, one that earlier generations of socialists understood intuitively, in which we've allowed to rot the civil social sphere. At its height, the American socialist movement was not just about parties or unions. It was about independent schools, newspapers, mutual aid societies, reading rooms, cultural associations, institutions that built a shared life outside the state and outside the market. They weren't just tools for organizing workers. They were spaces for organizing meaning. They created a material and imaginative infrastructure for socialism to be lived before it could be won. Today, that terrain is mostly abandoned, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I agree that the civil social sphere is important, but I think that he misses, and I mean, look, I didn't study history, okay? Maybe he had, maybe he knows more than me about this, but the way that I read history is that a lot of these kind of quote unquote independent newspapers or mutual aid societies or cultural associations were funded by the labor movement and were funded by unions or socialist parties. And, I don't think they were like just so independent, freestanding outside of this other broader material context, right? I mean, there were material conditions that existed that allowed these things to thrive. I'm kind of a materialist. I think that there are material reasons that things happen. And so even as he kind of sets it up by saying, I don't have a roadmap, blah, 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 he kind of gestures towards, he's like, union reform, not viable. I'm super skeptical of it as a project. And I don't have a project, but maybe the civil social sphere. And it's like, I'm just like, that is super weird.
Well,
I think.
And it's not to discount the importance of the things that he lists there, right? Obviously, we think having working class media is really important. That's why we do what we do on this show. Having social and cultural institutions and structures for people,
Right.
everyday people to come together and bond and build relationships and solidarity. That's really important. But I think, to your point, it doesn't happen totally isolated from actual worker organizing and without like a real base of economic support and economic power. So yeah, a lot of what he says does resonate. I mean, I've been involved in unions for a dozen years now. I've run into a lot of obstacles. I've run into a lot of people who have titles but aren't necessarily leaders. I've run into a lot of leaders who've been shoved aside and burned out. So a lot of that does resonate. It's just, yeah, I mean, you could say this about really anything, and I appreciated the comment Huntsville Dim Worker left saying, no activity comes without choices, which means some sacrifice.
Exactly.
No one can do everything or be everything, and that is true. Like, for me, I've chosen labor as a primary path. I respect that other people do electoral work, and like that's their thing. As long as we can understand where each other's coming from and hopefully have some synergy in our efforts, I'm fine with that. And for other people, organizing workers at the shop floor or elections aren't really their thing. Maybe it's building mutual aid and building those mutual aid networks. That's great. We need all kinds in our movement. But the idea is to build a broad working class movement of people who recognize their class and recognize their power as a class. And I don't know that you can do that without having workplace organizations. And I don't know that you can have strong workplace organizations if you aren't willing to try to engage with the existing institutions, however flawed or difficult they may be.
I mean, like Huntsville Dim Worker said, like you said, no activity comes without choices, which means some sacrifice. No one can do, can be or do everything. And that's so critical because, I mean, and like I started my activity. I think that like electoral politics is kind of the first, when people get like a fire in their belly and say, I want to change the world, electoral politics is kind of the automatic thing that they go to. And that's what I went to immediately. And like, that generated a lot of apathy in me about electoral politics, the 3 or 4 years that I spent kind of really doing that as my path. And so I shifted paths. I still recognize, obviously, the importance of electoral politics. And I think it's like super important that we have people that at least, don't want to destroy working people, don't want to kill working people. I think that's great. And I think that's good. But like, I was convinced by my reading of history and by my experiences on the job that building unions are kind of, like I said to Matt in my email, basically like the best bang per activist hour. It's a sort of mathy way to think about it, but that's how I thought about it. And because as you have a broader goal of building an organization that can fight for broader social change, and then as you are doing that, you're able to fight for people's immediate working conditions, right? Like when I did grievances for the union and I saved somebody's job, like I immediately improved somebody's life and then got them to be more committed to the union. I was able to educate them about what unions are, like as I'm doing this. And, you know, and that's kind of the power that you get from that. And so, you know, and it's just it was more meaningful to me to be kind of there directly kind of affecting people's working conditions instead of, you know, kind of being a stranger, knocking on a stranger's door, asking the stranger to vote for another stranger that neither of us have ever met or will ever meet. And in all likelihood, because I was knocking on doors for Democrats in Alabama, the person was going to lose, but hope that if they didn't lose, that they didn't let us down like everybody else had before. You know, I mean, I felt like that was pretty disempowering. I think probably it has to be done. Somebody's got to do it, but it couldn't be me as a primary vehicle. I had to do something that was a little bit more immediately meaningful, and maybe that speaks like to my like small attention span. You know, I'm not saying it's a good thing that I can't do electoral politics in Alabama as a primary vehicle for social change, but I'm just kind of explaining where I'm coming from, right? But I have a, you know, that's kind of my perspective. I value people that do the other stuff, but you know, I think that union stuff is super valuable. And Jose says it's hard to be a part of union reform when those you think are genuine about their union reform sell out. Talking about the organization in your thumbnail, the TDU, and like no doubt. If you feel let down by reform organizations, no doubt that's going to make it more difficult for you, like personally, but you know, structurally. You know, what does it mean for what should people do as a result of people selling out? You know, I don't think it means give up. Like, I just don't. Bellscore says he's making an argument that the state has co-opted unions in a way that their form has changed, and the historical examples y'all point to existed in a different set of material conditions. As a Marxist, he has a complete different perspective on how things work. The two sides of the argument are going past each other. The state has co-opted unions in a way that their form has changed, and the historical examples y'all point to existed in a different set of material conditions. Yes to the second. I'm not sure about, has the state co-opted unions? Is the reason that unions are lethargic because of state co-optation? I don't think so. I think it's more
I think it's a factor.
That maybe a bit, but I think it's just that they've been beat. By the employers.
I think you can make the argument that a lot of unions have been really trapped into the legalistic state process, right? And you know, they're scared to do things that are against the law. They're scared to do things, you know, that are against the rules, so to speak. And you know, it's kind of a box themselves into a legalistic process through the state, which is obviously not really set up to represent working people. I can hear out that argument for sure. I agree with you, Jacob, that I don't think it's the primary reason.
Right. But then, I mean, even if that is true, even if we accept that, and I don't know why the state co-opting the unions as the thing that co-ops that makes the unions less militant is like relevant in the analysis of like what happens next, because we both agree unions are not as militant as they should be. Right. And so then what? Right. Then what? If like, because even if the working class is like less coherent than it was in the 50s and 60s, the working class as a like material set of people exists, I think, in the Marxist analysis. There's a group of people that produce wealth and don't own the means of production, and then there's another group of people who own the means of production and take the wealth, right? So there's a coherent working class in that sense, even though it's like kind of been broken up because of the various social forces, blah, blah, blah. Okay. There is a working class. It has, it wields a certain amount of productive power that gives it unique place in society and unique opportunities to wield that power for lots of reasons. And so if he is disagreeing with us on that, right? Does he disagree that there's a working class that contains a lot of power that could be wielded for broader social change? Like, if we disagree on premise one, then, I mean, there's like, we have to like really examine, our priors, right? But it's difficult for me to conceive of a person who disagrees with premise one, that the working class produces the value and that production of the value is powerful. If we agree on premise one, then organization of the working class as such is paramount. If it's paramount, how do we do it? Unions seem like an obvious place to go, right?
Well, and the last thing I'll say on that is there are plenty of Marxists who have chosen the route of boring from within the labor movement to try to affect change. Again, you can argue that maybe there's a better path, but I'm all ears on what that is. And maybe there is a better path for you individually or for some people over here. But yeah, I don't know that the argument that Matt has made in his essay convinced me to just give up and walk away. If there was a more compelling alternative, that would help. But I think a lot of the criticism rings true, and you can have a lot of those critiques of involvement in basically any existing institutions, as well as trying to build new and original institutions, because that's not easy either. Union Gus pointed out that the IWW got their asses kicked outside of the legal system. And so that is something else that we consider is like, it's easy to criticize the unions for being legalistic and kind of playing within the rules. But at the same time, those who have not have mostly been destroyed.
Right. And like destroyed. And so what does it mean to be destroyed? It means that vehicle for social change and day-to-day improvement in people's lives has been destroyed. Who has made the lives of more people better? Like, even if we just totally forget about everything else, who has made more lives better? The IWW or the rest of the labor movement? It's obviously the rest of the labor movement. And that's why, I've got a lot of respect for the IWW, and I think there's a place for them. And I wish them the best of luck, and I hope that they succeed. And I've been a member, right, for a long time. But I just, I don't think that's, I don't think building red unions is the way to go. I just don't think it's got a great track record. And that's what I care about, right? That's what I have, like things that I want to happen. I want, and fundamentally, like, I want people's lives to be better. I want the world to be better. And so, like, I'm not ideological about how to do that. I am ideological about making that happen. And so how do we do that? I think that, the unions that exist are a great way to go. Platypus thinks that conditions, this is Boskar in Boskar777 in our YouTube chat. Platypus thinks that conditions have degenerated to a point where nothing from the past works and a completely new paradigm needs to arise from within a reconstituted working class, totally separate from existing institutions. None of this is necessarily my personal opinions. I'm just trying to represent their view. I appreciate that. As I said, I'm not familiar with Platypus. And so, like, I don't know what that means. What does it mean to have what does it mean to have a completely new paradigm that needs to arise from within a reconstituted working class, totally separate from existing institutions? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's lots of ways. There's lots of ways you could parse that and come up with something, but I don't know. Yeah, I would just need to know more, and maybe I need to look into this Platypus, these folks more. I don't want to misrepresent them or mischaracterize them, but I don't know. I think there's a point where folks get really philosophical and talk themselves into circles in a way that justifies not actually doing much of anything. And I don't want to say that that's those people, but I have encountered those people out in the world. And so I don't know if that's what it is.
Boscar says, what does that mean is always my problem with the platypus and sublation people. So maybe platypus is related to this Sublation magazine. I'm not sure. I've seen some of their stuff before, but and that's why I wanted to have him on too, right? Like I really do feel like I was fair with, I don't feel like I was taking him out of context or anything. That is why I wanted to have him on the program so he could answer that question. What does that mean? And so it's a bummer that he wasn't able to make it. Appreciate everybody's contribution in the chat. Thank you so much. IWW has a lot to teach federal workers who just had their unions dismantled. Yeah, I agree. My saying the track record of the IWW is like less interesting to me than the rest of the labor movement is not to say, super not to say, I still carry my IWW card, even though I'm not a member anymore. I still have it with me. Not to say nothing to learn. Absolutely not. Lots of things to learn. Lots of valuable things in the wobbly tradition. Very, very valuable things in the wobbly tradition. Okay.
And I'm open, honestly, to folks doing all of the above, right? I like you, I'm not really boxed in on particular methods. I just want to win. Yeah. I just want to win for working people. I want our lives to be better, our communities to be better. I want a future we can really believe in, a better world for my daughter and the generations that come after. And so I'm open to not knowing all the answers, and I'm open to other people having different approaches than me. The idea, hopefully, though, is that we are building power as a working class, as the great majority of people who do the labor in the society, who create the wealth, and who do not have the power or the ownership at this time. And so whether that's moving the ball down the field 3 inches or moving it several yards, I'm down to collaborate with folks wherever they come from.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.